Welcome to the Live and Tell Show, the highest quality movie review show on the internet.
I'm Liv.
And I'm Tell.
And today we saw Leave No Trace, directed by Deborah Granick. Was essentially a dramatic film starring Ben Foster, who played a military veteran, who essentially, him and his teenage daughter, played by, I think, what was her name? Thomasin McKenzie? Thomasin McKenzie, and this was, I don't think this was her acting debut, but this was pretty close to it. I think this is going to be it. But anyways, it essentially follows a father and daughter who live in the woods of a national park in Portland, Oregon. And very early on in the film, they're discovered by the police and essentially are forced to reintegrate into normal society. As this reintegration is happening, you're slowly coming to realize that the codependency between the daughter and father maybe isn't as strong as it once was in the beginning of the film, and maybe the daughter is integrating a little bit better than the father is, which is a sad truth, but it brings you through the rest of the storyline to the end of the movie. So I'd say that like one of the most notable elements about this movie was probably the performances by Ben Foster and Thomasin McKenzie.
Yeah, Thomasin McKenzie, solid acting. She sold a lot with her silence, I'd say.
Oh, absolutely.
Just this little dialogue, but she sold a lot with her silence, and socially awkwardness really pulled through. But it's how you'd expect a 13-year-old girl to act when she's been in the woods for years. It's definitely,
absolutely,
especially around other people.
Only living with her father.
Yeah.
No, I would be that. I would be that awkward as well, and that kind of that leads into Ben Foster's performance.
Yeah.
Ben has been in many movies I've seen him in, but they're mostly high-energy thrillers. This was a more realistic role that he was in. He had to dial it back a little bit and sort of show his poignance through, just like you said about Thomasin's performance, his silence. And it was truly in those silent moments that you really felt him embodying his surroundings and truly reacting to things in a way that you could actually feel it. You didn't feel like, oh, what's going on? Like, why am I watching him just kind of stare? Or why am I... But you really felt like you were feeling the issues he was going through. I would say Ben Foster's performance was emotional. It was extremely stoic. Characters are always a hard idea to develop because you don't know if they're coming from the director or the actor themselves, but Ben, I felt, played his character very well and almost mild-mannered for someone who is a military veteran and someone who's suffering from PTSD. It goes to show that his lifestyle that he has built for himself and his daughter really sadly, not to say sadly, but almost is how he needs to live to be able to cope with the stresses that he has. Aside from Thomasin's and Ben's performances, I actually want to say that the non-actors stole the show. I think the amount of times I saw an actor that I was like, I feel like that's that person's real job. There's, not to spoil anything, but like there's a beekeeper in one of the parts, and you just really, at first I was like, oh wow, this is pretty cool, but just seeing the way she acted with the bees, and she picks them up, and I was like, there's no way that is this woman's bees. she owns these, that is her job, and I just felt like that was really well done. It made the dialogue feel a lot more raw and natural.
The writing in this movie is definitely something to write home about, because I know Ben and the director got together and they removed about 40% of the dialogue in the movie from the script standpoint, and I thought that was something amazing, actually.
I'm really impressed with that, just because it takes a lot to do something like that. I'm not going to call it, obviously it's not post-production, but to do something like that after you've already cast and everything like that, and instead of telling the actor, like, no, you need to do this, and letting it come out awkward, Ben worked with Deborah and they took out, like you said, about 40% of the dialogue, just to make it more realistic, because people aren't talking all the time. That's not how it works. So good for Deborah for relinquishing 40% of her dialogue and being like, yeah, that's okay. Get rid of it because it's going to make the movie better in the long run. Aside from, the writing and the plot and the more obvious things that are kind of handed to you, there's a lot of subtleties in this movie that definitely make you feel some type of way. Yeah. They make you feel emotions that you weren't really expecting going into it. You end up relating to almost all of the characters in whatever way that you can, because they are realistic, but they are also going through trials and tribulations that we would never know. We would never be able to exactly relate to it. They do a really good job at getting us to relate to it, though. So what I really enjoyed about this was, like I said, just how you relate to each character, really thinking to yourself, what would I do in this situation? I think that's something that I asked myself more than once during this movie. What would I do if I was that person? What would I do if I was the police officer? What would I do if I was Tom? Just
the beekeeper.
Just alone at the the beekeeper. What would I do? Right. Personally, I think one of the most important things in this movie were the conflicts, be they internal or external. I never felt like it was a definitive battle of good versus evil. Like, the police are trying to take you out of the forest, they're the bad guys. You could tell that everyone not only was dealing with the conflicts between characters, but you could see in their eyes that they're dealing with their own conflicts.
It's like everyone cared.
Exactly. The social worker knew that they weren't as happy as they were in the woods. They could tell. Same with Tom and her father. He tried not to portray, how it really wasn't working out at first. He didn't want to let her know that. And just like she didn't want to let him know that she noticed that he wasn't working out too well before it was too late, sadly. I personally felt like the internal conflicts were what made this movie and what led it to the end. They did a very good job at making the outside world a little more realistic. They weren't making you scared of the people around you. They were just making you upset and emotionally pulling at your heartstrings for this family. They're only a father and a daughter, but they're a family. You really felt for them and were just hoping that they could get the help that they needed from the people around them. The movie takes you where it takes you. It takes you where your emotions take you, and I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is that this movie feels different for everybody who watches it. You will either love it or you'll hate it because of where their emotions bring your emotions. So, emotionally, unsatisfied. Realistically, it was a phenomenal, very satisfying movie.
And it's what the director wants you. That's the most important thing, is the director wanted you to feel that way. It's not like unsatisfying not because it's bad. It's unsatisfying, but the director wanted you to feel that way.
I'm not mad at her. I'm not mad at her. She did it on purpose.
And it's because that's what life is. It's what life is. This is probably the most lifelike movie you'll see.
Right?
Yeah,
really.
She was saying it's like a documentary, almost like a well-structured documentary.
It feels like it, with, like I said earlier, with the amount of non-actors that they cast. You even had mentioned when we were talking earlier. You had mentioned that there's a scene in the movie where they're at like a 4-H club meeting and everyone has their rabbits and they're learning how to show their rabbits, and they're all real 4-H members from Oregon, so they were using. It's not just us saying that they were non-actors. No, these were really non-actors. They were just
a lot of real people.
Yeah, it was a lot of real people, but that's honestly one of the things that made it so enjoyable. If we had to rate it out of 10, would you give it a go see it out of 10 or a not go see it out of 10?
I'd say go see it out of 10 for sure.
Nice.
Yeah. So definitely.
Very generous, Jordan. Very generous rating.
Give Deborah Granick. Give Deborah Granick your money.
Deborah Granick made a really good movie. I would rate it. Go see it out of 10. Go see it. Just kidding. Don't put any of that.